folks. And, yeah.
Do we have any people registering for public appearances?
Okay, so we have no public speakers. We have no minutes available, so we'll go right into first agenda item.
Sorry, excuse me.
We've got a lot on our agenda today, so board members, I'm sitting over here so I can see you. Raise your hand when you want to get in the queue. Ask your questions. If you need follow-up, keep answering. Go ahead and continue. When you're done, give me kind of like a signal, and then we'll move on to the next person. Try to stay, get everything answered. If another board member wants to ask a follow-up question on something that one of our other board members asked, give me a cue on that too, and we'll get in. Otherwise, wait till the board member's done, and then move on to the next thing. So the first item on our agenda is something we're kind of looking forward to finish off, and that's the Western Motor contract. So if you, the speakers want to come on up, could you please identify yourselves so that people watching and listening can know who's speaking? So Matt, are you going to start this?
Yeah, I'm going to get started. Yep. From there. Good evening.
There are people watching and listening that aren't in the room, so and it's going to be on tape forever. So identify yourself for everyone.
Actually, only 2 years.
Good afternoon, Pam McGilvray, President of Nuestro Mundo, Inc.
Josh Forehand, Principal of Nuestro Mundo Community School.
So I just want to start out with very brief comments. I want to thank Nuestro Mundo for working very collaboratively on this contract. As the board is aware, the charter was approved quite some time ago now, and this is kind of the culmination of that charter contract process. And there were not what I would call major or significant changes to the contract. What really I would call these changes that are outlined in the board memorandum is changes to reflect what we've been doing, what Nuestro Mundo has been doing for a number of years now. There are changes to reflect current MMSD practice as well. And then there are changes to basically update language. For example, getting rid of the title of Assistant Superintendent because that's not a title we use anymore, which are more superficial but necessary and to make sure the document is accurate. So I'm going to leave it at that. I believe Pam does want to make a few comments, and then we'll open it up to questions.
Thank you. I just wanted to say thank you to the board for being part of this process and also for being so supportive of Nuestro Mundo over the many years that we've had this charter, and that we look forward to working in this new charter and really building off of where we've been and having great new successes. So thank you. And then I guess with that, just whatever questions you have about the details or anything on the contract, we're here for.
Hello. Some questions and actually some suggestions too. Let me just see. Start out with 4.03-2- I'm sorry, .2.3. And can we? It seems to me that because schools vary so much by demographics, that if we could have a disaggregated measure there and something like, you know, some percentage of the disaggregations rather than just, you know, kind of the overall achievement percentage of pupils kind of thing. And I'm open, you know, I don't have a particular formula, but it seems to me that just in terms of looking at the success of the school, that disaggregating there would be good. And, you know, and I'll just say that when I look at all our DLI programs in your school also, the number I always look at is personally, I look at 5th grade Spanish-speaking low income. And that's the number to me that's the most important number. All the other numbers are important, but that's kind of important. And so just targeting something along those lines or something would be the suggestion there. I'm going to keep going because I've got about 5 of these, and some of them are 403.2.4. Defining annual rates of growth on the access. I'm not, because there's 100 different growth measures you can use and different ways you can do it, and I'm not sure what we're doing with rates of growth with all of our students on the access. And maybe somebody knows that because I don't know it.
Well, I do know that the state of Wisconsin is working on that right now. DPI is on that, and they will hand that down to school districts hopefully within the year.
Okay, that's why I don't know it.
Yeah, and whatever they recommend is what we'll end up doing.
All right, maybe just throw that in there.
Sure.
And just say that because I think that's when we're moving from the AMOs to this. That's kind of it's this big question mark. 4.03.2.5. Reading and writing in Spanish are not among the measures. And if we go back to 4.02.2.2, it says develop proficiency in speaking, listening, reading, and writing. And here we've just got oral skills. Is that, I mean, is there a reason, or?
Will that need to be amended today?
Well, the contract comes back at the end of the month, so. Yeah. Nothing gets voted today. So this is just discussion, suggestion, kind of things. I mean, would that be something that you think the school community would be fine with?
Yes, and those are, we gather data on those items already. The degree to which that can be used in a comparison with other schools or other dual language programs might not be as readily available as something like the ACTFL, which is more of a standardized assessment.
And this also says adequately yearly progress, which I take it as like an NCLB phrase.
Yeah, we must have missed that one. We tried to get all those holdovers out. Where's that?
4.03.2.5. And I guess that, I mean, I don't care what it really looks like as long as I think that some measure of biliteracy should be there as well as oral.
Agreed. Yeah, so we'll change that to be more of like a comparison with like programs disaggregated.
Yeah, and again, that might not be compared to other schools, but just to see how the progress is going. I also think that comparing among your students, are your English-speaking students, how are they gaining biliteracy as compared to your Spanish-speaking students and things? I mean, I think that's
Definitely,
all.
yeah.
I know that's important to you, and I think it's important to the board to know where the successes are and where more work is needed and things like that. The other two are actually kind of not really with the school, but rather with the board. 4.03.3.2. Matt, you guys, this numbering system is crazy. I guess I'm not, this alternate accountability plan, is this the contractual plan, or is this just something that the school would be doing for itself? If there were an alternate accountability plan.
So, this is the same language that was in
before.
the previous contract, and if you'll also look at 4.03.3.1, which is the section prior to that, any sort of alternative accountability or alternative assessment plan would be brought to the board by October 1st of the year in which it's to be implemented, and I think the school district itself is is kind of at a place where we're looking at a more comprehensive way to assess what student success looks like. And I think that Nostromundo is poised to be a leader in that, to be a collaborator as well, but also leverage our charter status to maybe look at different ways of assessment, pilot some things, and take that back to the school district.
Definitely. I just, a little clarity. And then the last one is that on the, on 24.03, the monitoring reports, can we have something in here that those are provided not only to the administration but also to the board?
I would agree with that.
I think one of the things that when we've come with charter renewals is that they've fallen off the board's radar for 5 years, and we just, and then it's like, oh, it's time. And so I think that by, I think there's 2 interim reports or something like that in there, and to have those just provided to the board, that way it's like we remember that you still have this going on. So thank you very much, and yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Great, thank you.
Anybody else? Hey, one other thing that I would like you to, in your head, start thinking about is that if you could create the best facility to do your program in, what would it look like? I think you should start thinking about that, because we're going to move sooner or later, and we may be able to build your building. And what would it look like? So I think we should put that on the table and start thinking, and even if we don't build one, move into one, what are the things you'll need, and what would it look like?
Thank you, Mr. Loomis, for allowing us to dream that way, because that has been something that is very important to all of our families in the community, and we've been thinking about things like how we bring different community groups actually into our building, and maybe have childcare opportunities, 3 to 5K opportunities. So we've have a lot of ideas that we've been building around, and we have felt constrained by our temporary nature of our lease agreement. So we very much welcome that opportunity. Thank you.
Yeah, good. So if I come and tutor, will you also teach me Spanish?
I will also be still trying to learn Spanish, but I keep trying.
That's one of my goals, and I have to learn more Spanish.
Good. You're welcome anytime.
Stuff you don't say, folks.
This is actually a related question. When you think about facilities, what percentage of the students are coming from the Alice area these days?
I don't have the exact percentage
Just
available.
ballpark.
I would say 80 to 85%.
Okay, so-
The vast
so-
majority of
So when
students.
you're talking about facilities for continuity, it would that being nearby would still be important.
I think so.
Or maybe consider expanding. So don't limit yourself to what you have. Think about where you'd like to take it, what it would look like. I think that's a legitimate ask of you. The program is doing well. No reason why I shouldn't expand. So anybody else? Thank you all. Board members, this is where you can.
Okay, thank you.
I did bring this. This is not a April Fool prank. This is indeed my last share of this committee. So I brought you a little treat. So board members, your last chance to get up there and help yourself to a little piece of mac and cheese pizza or spinach and feta. And if they don't get in on it, folks, help yourself. I'm not taking it home. Okay, next item on our agenda is community schools. So, our next team want to get on up. Michelle, start it, and then make sure you announce again. Make sure so people are watching and hearing. Introduce yourselves. If you will.
Can we get a chair for?
Use rack. Rack paper.
All right, thank you so much for having us today for our community schools update. The purpose of this time with you is one, to just kind of spend a little bit of time reminding us of the journey we've been on in implementing community schools. We want to bring you up to speed on how we are really focused on monitoring our implementation and how implementation looks different when you have two schools that are in their third year and two schools that are in their first year, and how we're trying to adjust and learn as we go. And then really we want the majority of the time to be a highlight from our schools. And so with us today, we have our 4 resource coordinators. To my far right, Sonia Spencer with Mendota Elementary. Rosie Gittens here with Leopold Elementary. This is Erin Peterson, our community schools manager, who works here in the Family Communication Department with me. We have Erica Brown with Hawthorne Elementary and Rachel Dieterding with Lakeview Elementary. You'll get to meet each of them in just a little bit. I want to, oh, my mic is on. All right, thanks. And I want to thank you again for the investment that you made in community schools in the last budget cycle, which helped us to hire our Lakeview and Hawthorne coordinators and to move forward with community schools. So hopefully this will be a good update for you. Just as a reminder, as you saw in the PowerPoint deck, we started on this journey in the 15-16 school year with an incredible seed grant from Madison Community Foundation. And that grant allowed us to hire an LTE planner at the time who worked to bring together a community-wide group. That group looked at all of the national research on community schools, helped develop our local framework, and also was integral in our kind of our criteria and selection for our first 2 schools. And those first 2 schools, of course, were Leopold and Mendota. And they began implementation in the 16-17 school year. And then in 17-18, we decided to hold steady with Leopold and Mendota, and we had come back and given you an update and said that we were not going to expand at that time because we were still adjusting. We were using our qualitative evaluation and running some baseline quantitative data at that time, but really wanting to be focused on our implementation. We were successful in securing additional grant funds, which was great, and we used the 17-18 school year to refine our selection process for the next 2 schools. And you all were gracious enough to approve the budget request that we came forward with, and we added Lakeview and Hawthorne for implementation this year. And since we've been on this journey, you all have also adopted the new Scaling What Works document, which gives more distinction and specificity around what is considered a pilot versus what's validating, and then how do you actually take something to scale. So for just our common language, I would say that we consider ourselves in the validating stage, and a lot of the questions that are in that document we are using to help really measure whether or not we are ready to scale at even greater lengths. As just a reminder, we have our original Madison Community Schools framework that we did develop in that first year, which was November of 2015. That one's available on our website. But since then, there have been 2 documents nationally that have come out more recently, and one is the Community School Standards that's been published by the Coalition for Community Schools, and NEA has also issued a toolkit on the 6 pillars for community schools. And we sent those to you as attachments. We wanted to make sure that we just name them because we consider whether you use the language of pillars or standards, there are some common things, components to the community school model that you'll see in both of those documents that we really use as a way of making sure that our implementation is going well. And it's also referenced, those, at least the standards, excuse me, are referenced in our qualitative evaluation. So when the Wisconsin Evaluation Collaboration is going in, they're definitely looking for how we are implementing to those standards. So just wanted to remind you all that we're using multiple documents as a way to guide our approach. And I'll let Aaron talk a little bit about the model.
So the model that we're talking about, so Nichelle on the last slide, previewed the community school standards. And so these on the screen now and on your laptops are the standards that we use to assess how we're doing in our qualitative evaluations. So these are the bullet points that we're looking for. So the community school strategy was adopted and implemented, these are ways to assess how the community school strategy is adopted and implemented, and then if we're setting the necessary conditions that are appropriate for college and career and community readiness, and those standards and how they're being incorporated into both now Lakeview and Hawthorne. So, it just said on the bottom too. So yeah, based on the community school standards, you don't have to change it. That's fine. I saw as I was thinking what's there. And so just quickly, these standards don't tell us necessarily how to implement, but they're telling us what we should be looking for. So what are the look fors? What are the cues? What are the key pieces that we need to have in place in order to be able to kind of continue moving forward and elevating the steps that are being successful.
All right. So just we wanted to talk a little bit about our efforts around continuous improvement and how we're using evaluation. And we wanted to spend a few slides on this because I think what's been important for us in the validating stage is there are questions that we need to be prepared to ask. And some of that is around kind of our evidence and what are the conditions that we're seeing that would allow us to scale. So just to be transparent around our qualitative evaluation, we have been using the Wisconsin Evaluation Collaborative for the last 2 years. We sent you the year 2 process evaluation. They also did our year 1 evaluation. And right now that evaluation only is focused on Leopold and Mendota because obviously Lakeview and Hawthorne are in their first year. We won't have a report from them until the end of this school year. They've gone in and have done focus groups, interviews, observations, and they've also reviewed documents that have been created at the district level and also at the school level to really look at how we are implementing. So they're very much focused on the process of implementation. How do people perceive the school is becoming a community school? How do they feel about relationships? And that comes from students, teachers, family members, community partners, really trying to get a holistic view of how we're implementing and what might feel and be different about the school as we're implementing. So just wanted to name that. The developing site-based systems for building evidence, one of the things I think we're learning is that at the district level, when we initially envisioned community schools, we did create a logic model. And the logic model was at a district level. What were the kind of expected short-term outcomes that we thought we would see, the long-term outcomes, and what were some of those activities that we would want to see in the early implementation. That logic model, I think, needs to get updated, but more specifically, what we're learning is that at the school level, because each school goes through its own needs assessment, its own asset mapping, its own prioritization of like the top needs that they think is important for them to address, we really need to drill down more to the school level to build the systems for building evidence. And so that is one of the things that I think we're recognizing that we need to do to be more successful as we continue on in our implementation. We continue to work with stakeholders. Again, that's family members, our staff, our community partners to understand what's meaningful to them and how to garner their support. for the community schools model and strategy. And then lastly, we have our own MMSD research program evaluation team creating the quantitative data that we always said that we would track and measure, or monitor rather. We sent those to you in data slides. And, you know, right now, again, those are just for Leopold and Mendota. Quite honestly, based on the metrics that are in there for attendance rather, chronic absenteeism, behavior referral, some of the things that we had said at the big level we would monitor, we don't necessarily see any positive change. We didn't expect to in the early implementation of community schools. We know that those kinds of metrics are very hard to move in the first few years of a community school, but we knew it was important for us to at least collect the data and to keep monitoring it, and then using the qualitative process to ask ourselves, what will it take for us to move some of those metrics? So this is just kind of an overview of how we are taking the implementation seriously. We're using qualitative and we're keeping our eyes on the quantitative data. This slide is just an overview again of the process evaluation that our qualitative evaluation provides for us. Again, it's helping us understand how we're implementing. That's at the school level, and it's also at the district level. And if you looked at our year 2 evaluation, you would see that they had recommendations per standard for schools to improve upon, as well as for us at the district level. And we'll be excited to see how Lakeview and Hawthorne come out at the end of year 1. And the outcome evaluation, again, is since we're early on in implementation, we think it's really important for us to be looking at the data around outcomes for young people, for family engagement, for community partnership, for how organizations see themselves connected to the schools, so that we can continue to map out those outcomes and get more refined. We want to be able to tell a really positive story about how the community school designation is increasing access, it's increasing participation, that school climate feels different, that kids and families feel like they're getting connected to the resources that they need. And I think that where we are in our implementation is that we want to continue to map out patterns that we're seeing in the outcomes so that we can get more nuanced and much more refined in the way that we're talking about community schools. So just as an overview, as we're kind of in this validation stage, as I mentioned, we want to take that district level logic model and really get it down to the school level so that each school has its own logic model that's more clearly defined around the inputs they're focusing on and the outputs they're hoping to produce based on their prioritized needs. We, as our evaluation did recommend that we improve our data collection systems at the district level and at the school level. And so that's something that we're continuing to build on. We, as I already mentioned, we're going to use our qualitative evaluation for Lakeview and Hawthorne at the end of year 1 to go back to some of those validation questions around what are the conditions that need to be in place to take something to scale. And so those are the questions we'll be asking ourselves. And as many of you know, we have been in partnership with the Foundation for Madison's Public Schools around their Challenge Grant for Community Schools. And that partnership looks like it's an important partnership in that as they're going out and raising money, they also want to be able to tell the story of community schools. And so we're in partnership and really constructing a narrative about who the school is, who do they serve, what are their needs, what are their priorities, and then talking about our early impact so that we can, the foundation can continue to attract donors who support this initiative. So I can pause there before, if there are any questions. Yes.
Go ahead.
When we talk about getting qualitative data and people's perception of whether or not they feel part of the community school. Did you find a difference between people, like if you're observing people, it's kind of more general population, anyone that's part of that community, any stakeholder, versus if you're doing a focus group or going to an event, it's generally people who are really engaged in what's going on in that process? Did you find any sort of difference in between those results?
Yes, I think in one of the later pages in the evaluation, WEC, the Wisconsin Evaluation Collaborative, did talk about some of the focus groups, and the interviews were obviously with folks who were already really engaged or connected to the school, so their perception may be different than perhaps a more general neighborhood member. But they were more focused on folks connected to the school because that's where we wanted to see some of the initial perception or reality change and shifts for folks.
Okay.
Yeah. All right. Well, of course, we will welcome your questions all along. So at this point, we did decide to lift out a couple of highlights from the year 2 evaluation. Aaron's going to speak to Mendota briefly, and then you're going to actually hear how Mendota is focused on one of the major components of the model. We'll do the same for Leopold, and then you'll also get to hear from Lakeview and Hawthorne on their first year implementation.
So we did lift some of the positive highlights, or some of the highlights from the 2 years of evaluation that we've had from Mendota. So it talks about the vision being strong at Mendota as a community school, done through clear communication of the community school, the coordination plan and what that looks like, and how the school is going to attack and address the needs of the community as identified through that needs assessment and asset mapping process, which is the creation of the coordination plan. Community groups, their partnerships can remain strong. The partnerships remain very engaged and involved. A lot of the evaluation feedback from partners is that they have a clear understanding of what's going on, a clear understanding of the direction of the school, and how they can be involved in what their role specifically is within that community school. And a lot of the partners are looking to try to expand those roles as well. Teacher involvement speaks to teachers understanding, and feeling connected to the school and understanding what's going on there. And what their perceived role is, and then positive family and school relationships, just within some increase in attendance for various events and things like that. Parents feeling like they can come into the school and they're welcomed in the school, those types of things. So the one thing we also wanted to lift is the consistent community school meetings and representation, and how that is still a struggle. Getting any group of folks together in evenings around dinner time or whatever. Remains to be something that all the schools are wrestling with, but they're making great progress, and they're consistently reconfiguring and figuring out different ways to engage the various stakeholder groups and parent groups specifically. And so that was one of the things that's been highlighted in the evaluation both of the years, that we're paying very close attention to, and how to lift that out. That's a little bit from the 2 years evaluation. So we'll have Sonia here kind of share some of the highlights that are currently going on at Mendota.
Yeah. So for year 3, we have been putting a lot of emphasis and focus on our third priority area, which is career development and job security, but more towards career development. So some of the things that we've implemented this year thus far, we've partnered with local organizations in Madison, one of them being the Northside Business Association, where they actually help us put the word out as to what's going on at Mendota Elementary. They've helped us with our job fair during the fall and the block party last year in the summer. We've also partnered with NECZ, the Northside Early Childhood Zone, in addition to working with a program that's called Ready, Set, Go. Our families have been able to participate in a training session, and this is actually the second cohort, and they actually just graduated on Saturday. They were able to get skills in areas of employment training, conflict resolution, budgeting, and we also had twice a week a financial advisor coming to Mendota to talk to families about financial stability. We have also partnered with organizations such as Hy-Vee and FedEx Those two are most consistent partners in the job development, whereas every time they have an opening, they reach out to me and they ask me to promote families that are looking for job opportunities. The Urban League of Greater Madison has been a really great partner with us throughout this whole concept of us being a community school. We have implemented what we call a job club monthly at Mendota, where the Urban League comes in and they are stationed in our building and they are providing resources in any areas of career development and employment training. And then the other piece is, like Aaron said, one of the great things that we've seen out of this model of being the community schools, I think it really speaks to what the teachers are able to do now, which is teach our scholars instead of having to worry about what the needs are at home. With me being in the building and the social worker and the parent liaison, it just makes the transition easier for everybody to be able to navigate the community schools.
I just have one little question, and that is interpreters, are they available if needed, both Spanish interpreters or sign if needed?
Yes,
Do we
they
have
are.
a sign interpreter?
Yes, yes, we always request interpreter if we do need it. Actually, we request it at all times, yes.
DJ? Heard really good things about what's been happening with Mendota with community schools, and so thank you for the work. And it sounds, and some of the programs you described definitely geared towards the families and the adults and things like that. Have you making some progress in bridging like the participation in those programs into bringing people into the shared leadership, the deciding the directions of it, that kind of thing, or is that still an area of needs improvement?
You know, I'm not going to lie, I think it's still an area of needs improvement, but with programs such as FAST, and we're actually just ending our first session, we're looking to actually transition those families that were into that program into our community school committees or PTO, or just combining them into the school environment, because right now they're at a point where finishing FAST, they're ready to do more, and they want to learn, and they want to keep moving. So that's what we're looking at, is literally implementing that FAST cohort into the school community.
And did you have interactions with the Navigators program, the Northside
Yes.
Navigators
Mhm.
program? And,
We did,
and,
yeah.
okay.
The Northside Planning Council group?
Yes,
Yeah.
yep.
Yeah, they're involved with you
Another
too.
kind of,
Yep.
a related
They
struggle.
are, they're
a
actually
related
one of our
struggle.
biggest supporters and partners also.
Good.
Mm-hmm.
I was
Thank
going to
you.
ask that, so thanks, TJ.
Thank you.
Ahmad?
How did you find that, in general, I guess specifically for your role, staff support helped in the success of like the program in the first couple of years?
Yeah, one of the things, it helps to have buy-in, of course, from the principal. So one of the things that I do appreciate is the fact that our principal does reach out to staff and lets them know exactly what's going on, or the importance of us being a community school. It's still, we still have a lot of work to do. I think that in order for community schools to be a staple in the Madison School District, we definitely need the district to, and I know you're standing by it, but really stand by it. So to me, that means if somebody's being hired to work at Mendota Elementary, they need to know that their schedule is not going to look like any other schedule at any other MMSD school that is not a community school. Because we are different, because we do things differently, our hours could look different, and our community is different. So I think there just needs to be more support on this end to make sure that not just, people that are coming in, but the city of Madison is very aware of what the community school model means.
I appreciate that last comment. Have you run into some difficulties with staff you needed to change your schedule, or do you have it like you want it now, or do you think you need some changes?
I mean, it could definitely change. I'm a mom myself, so it's very hard sometimes to be at school long hours and work evenings and participate in weekend events. I totally understand. But it can't be just the role of the coordinator. I think there definitely needs to be more support. But I do believe at Mendota, we do have a core team that really believes in this work and want to be a part of the work and are just there. And there are some people that, just are busy or just aren't able to do it, which is totally understandable. But I do think involvement could be better, yes.
The people you just said that were there and wanted to do this, are these staffers?
Yes, yep.
So
It's
they're
staff.
extending their day?
Mm-hmm. It's staff. We have family members that are, that have jumped in, and they're volunteering at events. They are tutoring, whatever it is that they are needed for, they're there. They're helping me with paperwork, with flyers, anything at all that I ask them, so, yeah.
Yeah, so one of the questions that I've had, and maybe, I was going to save till later, but maybe you can help me out a little bit, is that as I consider our community partnerships almost imperative to the success of not only community schools, but our district in general. But as we build these partnerships, there's several key components to it. One is consistent staff that can develop that relationships and ongoing relationships, but and in order to do that, are you resourced enough? Is there funds to pay to keep people there at extended hours? Can we shift, how do we do this? And without doing that, without resourcing it properly, with the staff that are ongoing and really into it and want to develop that relationship and stick and not leave a year later or something, which is another vital part of how to do this. Are we resourced enough in that and to be able to do that?
Well, for the most part, I think I'm very lucky. Right now, since we've been a community school, a lot of our staff that participates or helps out in any community school event have not gotten paid for their time because they are volunteering their time and they want to be there. So we've been very, very lucky in that area. We have, however, paid for SEAs if they are, coming in and wanting to help, just because, we want to make sure that they're being compensated. But we also know, we've just recently been talking about this in our meetings, that we're putting out the word to staff now that they can either get compensated or get PAC credits if they want to be a part of the community school environment and continue helping.
So I didn't, not to interrupt, but because I didn't want to inadvertently put you on a spot.
Yeah.
So Aaron and Nichelle, if you're getting understanding what I'm trying to get at here, to build a community school properly, you have to be resourced with staff there that can put their time in. It's wonderful to have volunteer time. We all get asked to do more than what we're supposed to do, but to do this properly, we got to resource them around all four. So if you're not feeling that you're resourced enough, the board should see that in a budget request.
Yeah.
So that I don't have to, didn't mean to inadvertently say, but so really it's a question you two need to try to prepare us for, because I know how to do a community school properly. It has to be resourced with people that want to do this work and can do it, and we got to make sure that we get the right people there, and to do that, we got to resource them.
Right. So let me just add, thank you for that, Dean. And what I would say is that when we came forward with each time that we've added community schools, we certainly asked you for dollars to hire a resource coordinator, salary and benefits, and $17,500 in startup money. Now, the startup money, after they get through the needs assessment, can be used by the resource coordinator and their community school committee to determine if they want to do contracted services, if they wanted to do extended employment, interpretation, however, whatever they felt like they needed. Not saying that $17,500 may resource everything that they want to do. So we've always known that in addition to the kind of the district kind of initial investment, the resource coordinators and principals have also been looking at writing grants, working with their adopt-a-school partners, thinking about new additional partners that can leverage in-kind or other kinds of resources. And at the end of the day, right, we need our resource coordinators to also come back and say, hey, like, we're in year 2. this is what we're trying to do. In order for us to move the needle, we need these additional resources to get it done. And I think that's where at the district level, we can look at, well, of the grants that we've brought in, are there resources we can allocate in that direction? Or can we go back to FMPS and say, you have this challenge grant for community schools. As you are out fundraising and talking to donors, here are some real needs at the school level, and our folks need these resources. So yes, it's all of the above. We've given them some initial money to start with, knowing that as they got more and more into the work, we would have to keep hearing from them on what they really need. We good to go to Leopold? Okay.
I'm sorry, just one question.
Go ahead.
What has Mendota done, if anything, to respond to what happens to our children out of school, right? So maybe, the challenging situations that our children are experience out of school and bring it into the school in different ways, right? Whether it be behavior and other challenges. Have we been able to close the gap on that in supporting families and a child that's experiencing challenges at home? Like real serious challenges, right? Have we been able to, and is that the role of community schools?
Well, I can tell you that we are partnered with, we do have a behavior specialist at school, so we're partnered with Catholic Charities. And our behavior specialist is there part-time, and he does see, I want to say maybe 16 students that need services. In addition to him seeing the students, he's also connecting with families, and he's also connecting with teachers to make sure that they're implementing the same therapy or the same system when the child is integrated back into the classroom. We have a housing caseworker that's been helping families with housing assistance. And this year alone, we've actually seen more of our families stable in housing just because of that services that we're providing, which in turn is allowing them to really get into that career development. And that's why the programs such as Ready, Set, Go are really a circle within behavior specialists, the housing caseworker, and then making sure that they're securing that job to pay rent. We still have a lot of kids that are struggling. We have a full-time social worker. We also have a parent liaison that do a lot of one-on-one and home visits. So there's still a lot that we need to do. I'm not, it's just obvious. But I think that, the other piece about being a community school is making sure that, we're extending those services, especially with the behavior and mental health. One of the things that I know Carletra's is trying to do is get a full-time behavior specialist at Mendota.
And then just to follow up, so we are tracking. I'm just wondering down the line if we can track what's working when it comes to behavior in our school. So
that I think also, as Michelle alluded to earlier, with being very specific in targeting the coordination plan, which I think also gets to your question of are we addressing the needs of students outside of school. So the Mendota coordination plan addresses homelessness and mobility, food insecurity, after school programs and access. Those types of things are programs in areas that affect students outside of school. So the coordination plan does begin to address some of those things. Do we have metrics or measures currently that are tracking the success of those? Not currently, but I think that's through what we've learned from the evaluation is that some of the larger metrics that we're looking at aren't giving us the ability to focus on are the supports that we have in for homelessness, are they affecting the kids that are getting those services? How are they being affected positively or negatively? Is it working? Is it stabilizing that family and stabilizing perhaps behavior or attendance and those students? Those are the things, the areas that we're going to begin to really target and hone in on and really dig deep into understanding are the things that we're doing in Mendota working to kind of move the needle or stabilize or secure students' safety and other larger out-of-school concerns.
Okay. Thank you. Did you want to?
Carla, I was just going to add, the only other portion is that with the mental health services in the school, that he is also able to train staff. And so we have trauma-informed practices training that he works in conjunction with the social worker to present to staff, so that it's not just him that's able to provide services and support for families, but that staff, the teachers, parent liaison, everyone is also trained to be able to respond appropriately and to know how to support those families, or to support our families as a whole. So,
great, thank you.
And as a reminder, that topic is next on the agenda.
Before we go to Aaron's highlight for Leopold, I just want to remind the board that I know that we also have a partnership with the City of Madison for Madison Out of School Time. And through MOST, there is a new management information system. They've been piloting with a smaller number of agencies, but one of the conversations we've been having with our MOST coordinator, Nathan Beck, is how do we get the management information system to also be the kind of data collection that tells a story about community schools? How do we help talk about kids who are accessing programming that's now in extended day, weekends, to address many of the unmet needs that families have? And I think we've been waiting for MOST to kind of that management information system to get up to, not up to scale, but to be more accessible, and for them to test out some of the kinks. So we're kind of doing, we're starting to track participation, we're starting to track dosage, things like that, but it's not at a level of sophistication yet to kind of tell you at a bigger level or a more impactful level. But that is the work we're working on. All right.
It's actually a perfect segue. Oh,
TJ, quick.
Yeah. Actually, I had a note and I was going to save it for later, but what you just talked about leads straight into it.
Okay.
One of the things that when I was reading the evaluation was that with Mendota, there was some listing of at least programs that people had participated in. But there's no kind of, and you were talking about, with MOST, you're talking about student programs, but also a lot of things at Mendota are geared towards families and things like that. And I guess that in future evaluations, if we can have some sense of, if you did a job training program, were there 10 participants or 2, right. or if you have a reading night, were there 6 families or were there 60? And some kind of things, just not even any real analysis, just kind of listing this stuff. And I think that in the first year evaluation there was some of that, maybe, but this year there's not much. So I guess in the future, kind of just getting a sense of of how much action's going on here and how many people are doing it and things like that is just get a sense of what's building.
That's
so for future evaluations and or monitoring and or whatever.
That's precisely what we've learned the last couple of years about how to measure the impact, the success of this model. We've got to get more fine-grained. So I think this will be a continued theme as we talk about the next few schools.
It seems like a good time to throw it in there. So.
Can I just quickly add, just with this email that I got from our partner, we had 15 participants, and 7 out of the 15 of them gained employment through this Ready, Set, Go.
Nice. Nice.
And so we will take those families and be able to drill down and track how that perhaps impacts the entire family.
Can you send us some info on the Ready, Set, Go program?
So segueing over to Leopold, so speaking of the MOST system, we're close to being able to pilot some of that information gathering with MOST and Leopold and Wisconsin Youth Company. Thank you. So that's hopefully will be our initial stab at kind of this larger system, being able to drill down in that. So hopefully we'll have some updates for you coming up. So Leopold, our 2-year evaluation, has a few struggles, but we lifted some of the things out here. It was a tough year for Leopold in their second year, brand new principal and a brand new coordinator coming into the building. With the exit of the coordinator, community partners really struggled. There was some process put in place to try to connect and keep the partners coordinated, but they stayed connected, they stayed engaged, but it struggled. The partnership struggled. Family engagement with Black families was also a struggle. And those things are things that they've pulled out and they're addressing. Limited shared vision of the community school. Again, I think with the change, the transition in leadership and transition in coordinators, I think a lot of the momentum that was gained was lost in Leopold with this transition. But again, Rosie will share some of the highlights. But these are the highlights and things that we learned and the things that the evaluation pulled out. And so Rosie will share some of the great things that are going on at Leopold now.
Good evening, everyone. So while we're trying to focus in a lot of all of the components of community school, we're really trying to this year to focus in what we call the relaunching of the community school, not meaning that we're going to start from zero, but that we are being very reflective about what happened in the past 2 years and using that as a leverage to get us help us get forward. When my principal, Peg, and I came into the building this year, we noticed that there is a lot of groups that operate, there's a lot of stakeholders, but they were all operating as silos. So there was a lot of duplicating of programming or groups or not necessarily a lot of communication happening. So after looking at that, we decided as a community school, like the whole purpose is to offer all to be together. The slogan that we started to working on is together we can. So part of restructuring this whole community school means making sure that the ways of communications are open within all groups within the building, within all stakeholders, making sure that everybody's on the same page about why we're doing this. It seems like a lot of people know what we were doing, but not necessarily why we were doing it. And because there's a lot of turnover within the building, and has been a lot of turnover, it's not a secret to anyone. I think everybody's at very different levels of understanding of what community schools is and the potential that it has to be transformational for the school. So I feel like this year has been reflecting on what happened, learning from that, knowing what strategies we need to do, put in place so that it doesn't happen again, and using, being very intentional of where we're moving with this. I feel like we were, when we came in, the past 2 years, they did a pretty good job about wrapping around systems, and now we're focusing on how we're gonna, now that that's taken care of, how do we now work within the core, within academics? How do we use community schools to strengthen the academics? How do we tweak our priority areas and make it more aligned to the SIP goals for the school? So some of the stuff that we have done so far is making sure that we have ongoing communication and meetings with our parent groups. Our PFO group is a very strong group within the building, and so we meet bi-weekly. Our principal, myself, and we meet bi-weekly and we problem solve. We have joined our family newsletter so that families are not receiving bits and pieces from different parts, but rather it seems a more cohesive communication where we're all together, coming together, gathering everything together, and it's just one message that's being sent out. Some of the other stuff is clear and on-time communication with staff members and all stakeholders. It seems like because of whatever reason or what happened, you know, the coordinator leaving, a lot of people felt like they were not getting enough information in a timely manner. So we're being very mindful of that. It's not perfect yet. It's a work in progress. It's not something that will happen overnight. I feel like the more we work on it, the more we gather feedback. We understand that there are many different ways of communications that we can approach. We've been doing a lot of those for the most part, and I know that there's room for improvement. So mostly it's re-engaging everybody who is in the building, re-engaging our partners, and re-engaging families, and making sure that we're all on the same page and moving forward, making sure that we're really listening carefully as to what needs to change, what needs to be tweaked, so that we continue on the right track. So we've been co-planning school events, meetings. We're meeting frequently, getting the word out to families, improving our ways of communication, and making sure also that we're sharing that leadership, that is not just the coordinator doing the work, that is not just the principal telling people what to do, but also that there's some sort of ownership of, like, when I came in, there was a lot of misunderstanding about, oh, this is an after-school program. This is just a program that runs within the school. And so we did some professional development to clarify that this is not a program. This is a way of working. This is what we do. We are. The whole school is a community school. It's not a side thing. It's in everything that we do every day. And I think while we're not there completely yet, I feel like I am very positive that that's where we're moving forward, because it seems like a lot of people within our building are ready for that.
Imad?
In the evaluation, under youth and parent engagement, it says there were a lot of mixed and negative interactions between parents and staff, especially with Black and Latinx families. I guess I just wanted to get your opinion on why you think we're seeing that, and then also how you'd want to address that moving forward.
There is definitely, I can talk all night about that, perhaps all week about various reasons. At Leopold, we have the dual language immersion program. 40% of our population is Hispanic. So we run two different programs, the English language instruction and then dual language instruction. And for what we have seen is that in the dual language instruction side, usually there is a very strong instruction in the cultural piece, bringing culture in and making sure you see reflector yourself into what your culture is, and that being Hispanic, being Latino, speaking Spanish, and the value of it. So we had done a pretty good job about putting that culture up and making sure that is value, and then that when you walk into the building, you feel validated at all times. While for our African American and Black families, it's not necessarily the same, and I'm not saying we're not doing it. It's happening, but it's not as strong as in the dual language immersion. So that's one of the aspects of why I feel that there's some tension that has been built around that, where there might have been some perceptions of that one group is getting more than the other group. So I think what our principal and our SBLT team is really working on is how do we take that and bring it back to our English language instruction. How do we are very intentional about culture, not just for our Hispanic community, but everyone in the building, with a focus on our Black excellence and aligning it with what the district is doing, making sure that you see it as you walk in the building, that you feel it when you are there, that you if you identify as Black or African American, that you feel like you're validated just like everybody else. I don't know if that answers your question. That's just one of the factors, yeah.
Okay, Nikki.
This may be a Nichelle question, this may be an administrative question, but community schools gets additional money from the Foundation for Madison Public Schools, correct? How is that money used? I know Leopold right now, we're hearing a lot of, we don't have this funding, we do have this. Can we use that to hire SEAs? Can we use that funding, or is that not possible?
Go ahead, Michelle.
Okay, so thanks for the question. The challenge grant right now technically just started in 2019. The executive director of the foundation has already secured funding through the challenge grant. We at the district have not requested any of those funds at this point. So she's raised funds. They're kind of sitting with the foundation. We have not requested any of the funds to be released, primarily because we still have grants that we had secured here at the district that we're still working down on those budgets. So in terms of
which includes the ability to hire an SEA.
So we have not put forth any kind of criteria, budget proposal, or anything.
The grants you're working off of right now, you can hire SEAs if you want to. Is that right?
So some of those grants did include a budget that had some extended employment and I think some interpreter dollars. I don't remember that we wrote into the budget specifically.
But you could
SEA,
use it
but
to apply to your need?
Yes.
So, Nikki, is that what you're trying to get
Yeah.
at? So you can hire SEA if you wanted to?
But not for day-to-day in-school
Right.
supporting
I-
students, but rather for
the after.
for after-school programming, for
Right.
community
Yes.
programming,
Thank you.
for family
Okay,
programming.
Correct.
That's what I needed to.
Right.
understand.
So it wouldn't be
That's where I
like we
got
would pick up the
confused.
salary at this point for like a year-long or a school year-long employee. We would be extending
Yeah,
opportunities
the
for
SEA
an
services
employee.
towards the communities at 3:30 on.
Correct.
Yeah, the bulk of the dollars that we get from grants are to support the half of a resource coordinator position, and we match that. We also put in funding for the family liaison position at each of the community schools, which is worth stating, which makes it a sizable investment. And then, of course, there's some flexible money that Michelle referenced, but not big dollars, not something you
That-
could.
I was just curious,
Yeah.
because you hear on the grants and you don't, I don't know is what the criteria
Yeah.
is, and I want to make sure.
Yeah.
Secondly, just one thing on the after-school program, and this is more MSCR, but in general, had a student that was contacted by a student who had some special needs, who was bullied into doing a specific physical act that he shouldn't have been doing, and he's been pulled from the program since then. His mother pulled him. Is there a way we can have some disability training at some of our MSCR?
Nikki, let's take that up offline. I'd love to hear more about that situation
I would
and
love,
learn
I would
about
love
it.
to.
Yeah.
I just didn't know when it was appropriate. to
Yeah,
do
not, yeah.
Sounds good.
That's obviously a good, important question to deal with another time. TJ?
It sounds like that you are taking the lessons to heart from the first year and a half, 2 years, and working with it, and that's good to hear. So first, just compliments on that. But the second thing is it's a little bit off to the side. But I've been concerned about, since the loss of the CLC grant, the number one is the number of students who are being served by Wisconsin Youth Company is much smaller than we're being served by the CLC grant. About 2/3 or a half or something like that. And I guess two things. Number one is this budget season is upon us. Supporting some equivalent of local funding for something like returning to the CLC thing, would that be helpful? And then secondly, how is this all integrated and affected in the community schools work?
So, huge challenge, one of the biggest challenges this year coming in, especially because one of our priority areas is after school time and increasing those academic support for students of colors after school. So that has been very challenging, one, with the limitations that we have, not only in financial limitation, but also even securing space within the building, securing instruction within the building, support, and even any detail, any logistics in general, and also the fact that we kind of we didn't have a choice. Beck and I, when we came into we just here you are, and by the way, there's not after school program.
Spring, we all got hit with that, and it's like, oh no.
Yeah. So we had no control of that, and that's okay. We work with what we have. So we have been able through the community schools to bring partners in and add a lot of after-school programming, which is nowhere close to where we need to be. It's not meeting the needs of every, and Peg will be able to speak more to that. We're doing what we can with the little that we're given. And
some really great opportunities.
Exactly.
Grab a microphone. Grab a microphone.
Sorry.
So the CLC grant, as you know, has criteria. So when you are 700 kids strong, Leopold is different than any other elementary school, as we know. So resources, are used differently. So in a CLC grant, you had to have 20% of kids in every week. So 20% of 700 kids every week in after-school care is really hard to do with the resources that we have. So, so that was another reason why we started problem solving with a number of district staff as well as our community schools group to think about what does after school time look like. And again, using every kind of grant, neighborhood association, everything we have to just get what we have going, which is some really nice opportunities for kids. Also partnering with Wisconsin Youth Company, as you know, and we're hoping to continue that partnership so that we have, we're going to hopefully, I mean, we're going to add like 70 more, hopefully 70 more kids to that after-school program next year.
And that was 40-something this year?
Yeah, we had we had 28 added free seats.
Okay, 28
and then
free seats
yeah,
and a total
and
of
then
40 seats,
then
right.
then we had a number of seats that we were able to work with Wisconsin Shares. And so next year we look to expand that and actually expand. So it also means, I mean, everything is big at also. So you're talking about, when you're talking about that number of kids, I mean, it means that you're taking over a lot of, I mean, all of our cafeteria, all of our gyms, our entire LMC and classrooms. So, but it's important. So you have to just plan for it.
But you
Yeah.
kind of opened up something when you talked about the different funding sources and things like that. And I guess that one of the themes that comes out in the evaluation and things is also about central office support and relationship things there. Clearly you're braiding funding and braiding sources
Mhm.
here. And I guess kind of whose job is it to do that is my question. I mean, is it yours or is it?
It's ours.
Oh, it's
I mean,
yours.
it's ours. We do everything together. Yeah.
So it's a share leadership.
Yeah.
It's not
I mean,
just one person
and keeping
gets to
track
do
of
the
all
work.
the
Yeah.
No.
reporting requirements and all the can't use this, can't use that.
Right. Mm-hmm.
And so I guess maybe this is for Nichelle. As it grows, and I guess Aaron's probably doing some of this now, is providing expertise and providing guidance and go-to. But I mean, do we need a funding grant kind of, define a position at some point where because I mean, when you've got grants coming from private
it's
and public
amazing.
and this and that, there's a lot of different requirements to keep track of, and I kind of want the people in the schools to be working with the people. I mean, you know what I mean? And some of that is the relationships with the donors, but so anyway, so I guess as you think forward, and I don't know if that's part of Aaron's position currently, but defining that role and support for that kind of thing is something I think is really important. And people are nodding their heads, so I'll leave it at that. When people agree, I'll just leave it.
Thank you. I just wanted to add one more thing to that. As we move forward, and I know Nichelle and Aaron are aware of this, that just like Peg mentioned, we are a bigger school. We're twice as big as most of the other community schools. And so the budget, in a way, needs to be somehow looked at, because we're receiving the exact same amount. And so we had to work with what we have, but we had doubled the amount of students. And the same applies for community resource coordinator. So I'm planning for a school that is twice the size. So just something to throw in your radar. I'm not telling you that it's wrong. It's just like to
But
keep
something that
in your radar.
Talking about 1.5 instead of a 1.0 and things
Exactly,
like that, in terms
just
of
like we
the
do with
size,
teachers,
yeah.
just like we do, with other sources. Like, I think it eventually is going to have to apply in the same way.
Yeah, Gloria, go ahead.
And just to go off on what the conversation we're having is that I think as a board, and I would like to hear from Nichelle and Aaron about, how we're thinking about sustainability of what we're doing and the growth within our schools. And have that planned out for us so that we are not year to year thinking how we're in desperate decision-making mode, right? Is really how do we sustain Leopold and Mendota and Hawthorne in looking big picture? I mean, do we spread this throughout the whole district? What does that look like, and how do we sustain it? And so, are we thinking about that? And
yes, can I hold that until
Sure.
our last slide?
Okay.
Not to make it about a PowerPoint presentation,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
I do have a slide right near the end.
Okay.
Okay.
Well, I am encouraged to hear that you understand what's going on, and also a little disappointed that what you just mentioned flies in the face of the equity models we've been trying to implement here. Leopold is twice the size of any other school. They should be resourced equitably. So thank you for bringing that up, and we have to discuss that here and make sure that that happens. So let's move on.
Thank you.
So we're going to move on, and we're going to have one of our first year school, Hawthorne. Erica Brown is going to share some of the highlights about the needs assessment and asset mapping process that first year community schools go through.
Hi everyone. First year as a coordinator at Hawthorne, but my 8th year at Hawthorne. I was the after school director there, so Hawthorne's home. First year we're really just digging into our needs assessment. So when we first started telling the staff and families about community schools, I definitely want it to be like a mindset. It's not like another program or something that we're just doing for now. It's definitely a mindset that we can really change how we're educating our kids for the better. The first connection that I had with the families was through a survey. So just asking them just 4 simple questions. How can Hawthorne be more welcoming? What resources would you like to see at Hawthorne? What is missing from Hawthorne in terms of activities or support? And surveys was given through the robo call and through face-to-face conversation. So after we collected that set of data, then we categorized it into themes, which came up with 6: academic success, out of school time, cultural, academic support, physical and mental health services, youth development, out of school time, family adult education, and development and cultural enrichment. I gave that list to teachers. 64 out of 70 responded, saying that academic support is first, physical mental health second, and then cultural enrichment in third, in that order. I did the same surveys with our families. I had so far 219 out of the 387, so I have, I think, 90 more surveys that I need to put out. My benchmark is 80% return. Right now, I have the...
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Can you come?
Yeah, do that.
Just a quick question.
Yes.
How did you select the people that you were going to survey, of the 70 or the 300?
So the 70 is the count for our staff total in the building. So 64 returned that.
Nice.
And then our
wonderful.
staff, we have 387 families, and so far I have a 219 return.
Nice.
So I just need 90 more, which I hope to get next couple
I
weeks.
want to know what you're doing.
Again, I think it's just that face-to-face, hitting all the different support groups that we have already. So we have a Latino group. So, I did a small mini community school presentation there. We have an African American natural circle support, did small, so right now I'm just trying to connect with everyone in the school before, trying to get them all. And we do meet once a month where everyone can, come and have their input in, but a lot of times those times and days don't meet for everyone, so I kind of branched off with little focus groups. What else? This month we'll be working on our asset mapping. So out of those themes, we're going to come up with areas of priority, and then with those area of priorities, what assets in the schools can help us address those focus areas. That makes sense, right? Yeah. What's that? Oh, the CERN. One of the bigger projects that we're doing is addressing the safety need for, there's the East Washington Tunnel that's on Fair Oaks and East Washington. Our kids are not using that tunnel. So we did a whole project of why you're not using the tunnel, and either it's scary, just dirty, just not used, especially in the wintertime, it's not cleared out. Just the beautification of it.
We need to talk to the city about that.
We have, so. So we definitely have. So we're in the middle of we have 3 grants, about $10,000 out there. Hopefully we're getting the next couple weeks, and starting with the Dane Arts. So we're gonna create a mural project. We talked with the city about the drainage and the LED lights that needs to be changed. Not only the mural that starts at the beginning, but painting the whole in the whole tunnel going through just one solid color. So that is hopefully, fingers crossed, September of next year, next school year. All right.
Thank you, and stick with it.
Oh, yeah.
Sounds like you know what what you're supposed to be focusing on, and good work on those on the surveys too. Gloria.
You know, those tunnels are scary. I mean, I think Mendota right
They
has
are.
one. I mean, do you have that same issue with students?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, we're actually supposed to be kind of coming back to it and revisiting what we're going to do with the tunnel.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because I remember when I lived in Kennedy Heights as a kid.
Yeah.
I mean, there was a whole bunch of stuff happening in those tunnels.
Yeah.
We're actually going to try to.
I would not.
We're actually just going to try to make it just one address to all the tunnels to be addressed within this year.
Okay.
Instead of having different projects going on.
Lakeview.
So yes, so now we're going to have Rachel Dieterding share some the highlights on engaging parents and students through the community school efforts going on there this year.
Yeah. Okay, so I'm Rachel. I'm the Community School Resource Coordinator at Lakeview, first year. And, okay, you did change the slide. Okay, cool. So I'm going to talk about kind of the 3 ways that we're looking at engaging families by focusing on students, because we put our students at the center every day in the work that we do as educators. What our focus has been on with parents, and then what we've been doing with the whole family. So in terms of students, there are a couple of things to highlight. So we've been doing weekly lunch bunches with kids. So basically like getting a group of kids together who may be having conflicts at school that are preventing them from doing their best learning. Sitting in a small group with a trusted adult, doing a short activity of choice. And then also highlighting opportunities for student performances. So we have 8 different STEAM after-school clubs that are happening this year, and we actually just had a big showcase date, and we had an article in the State Journal about that. We just had a school talent show. Our 4th and 5th graders do a state museum, so they pick a state within the United States to do to study, and then they have like a sort of museum set up where we invite parents to come in and community members to see their learning. And then we're providing a lot of daily recreational opportunities during and after school for kids. So we will be starting our recess running and walking club very shortly. We have T-shirts that we got through a grant. We'll be tracking kid activity during recess. We've a Girls on the Run club, triathlon training program. As far as parents go, this year we rebranded our monthly newsletter. So I worked with the communications department to create a template that meets our needs to be able to give information to families in digestible portions. And that goes out in backpack mail. It also goes out in with school messenger, text, and email blasts. And then we also have periodic adult restorative circles, so especially relating to ongoing behavioral issues. So we've gotten families together to talk about common issues that we're seeing at school. We have a lot of 4th grade girl drama happening right now. And so we've invited people to the table to do some collaborative problem solving around that. And then we just did a 3-week parent cafe series, partnering with Northside Early Childhood Zone, and we will hopefully be doing another 3-week series because we have heard anecdotally from parents that they want an opportunity to connect with other families in their kids' class because they don't know the names of other parents. They don't know how to problem solve with other parents, and a lot of our parents are facing the same issues regardless of home situation, socioeconomic status. It's there are some common themes. And so we heard them loud and clear, and we wanted to do something about that. Then as far as opportunities for the whole family, we've been doing a lot of like family field trip sort of things this year. So we got some free tickets to take our families to an Overture Center show. We have an upcoming science expedition field trip for families that actually Mendota is also going to on the 7th. That's a weekend opportunity. And then we're looking at potentially taking some of our families to Willie Street Co-op, which is down the street from us. They do $5 co-op dinners, which is a community event that a lot of our families may not envision themselves present at, but we still want to connect them to that community. And those are natural opportunities to be able to solicit some feedback about how our families would like to see our community school transform over time. We also do themed family nights, so we have 6 of them planned this year. A couple of all-school events during the day, so we do an all-school wellness day with UW Health, which is an adoptive school partner. And then we also have an all-school barbecue toward the end of the year where we invite families in. And then the picture that's up on actually it was the last slide, if you can go back. So that's a picture that was in, we had an article in the Northside News, which is a regional newspaper in Madison. And that's from our Peaceful Families, Peaceful Schools class. We also had an article in the State Journal recently, too. So that class is basically about violence prevention. So we have a movement therapist who comes in and teaches her curriculum called Disarming the Playground. And so it's all about promoting pro-social behaviors among students at school. And then also that she does this family class with parents. So parents and kids participate in movement activities. They talk about focus, ignoring distractions, stopping yourself before you get too far, and families work together and set goals. And then the parents also have an opportunity to talk with her outside of working with their students about just issues that they're noticing in their family, so that we can sort of provide that wraparound service for students, that they're getting that education during the day. They're working with families outside of school, so that we can promote those peaceful interactions in every environment for our kids. Okay, and then if you want to just, So this is a picture of our parent liaison, Tom Qualls, who's in the middle there, and this is an example of a lunch bunch that he recently did. So these are our 3rd grade girls, and so they had lunch with him, talked about a couple issues that they're having in class. They got to color with my new markers, which was a big deal too. So, and so as the resource coordinator, I work really closely with our parent liaison because he is really kind of the go-between between teachers, family members. He develops that relationship with kids so that when he makes that call to a family member, he's a name that's known in their household. And so we work really closely in the programming that we're bringing into Lakeview. And then also he has been a really great resource in trying to draw families into our community school committee meetings, or just trying to gather feedback from people who don't consider themselves meeting people, because a committee can sound kind of intimidating to some people, or it might not sound like something that they envision themselves being at. So we work really closely to gather that information so that we're lifting all voices and everybody has a seat at the table, even if they're not physically at the table. Yeah, go ahead.
Who's ever doing your social media, I follow you guys on Facebook. You're doing an excellent job.
Oh, thank you.
Of promoting activities for families, because I'm seeing posts almost daily.
Yeah, that's mostly me. Also Tom, a little bit of Tom, sometimes
whatever
you.
you're doing, it's working.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because it is getting it out there.
And we see the metrics too, and I mean, some of our posts, I'm like, 1,200 people saw this. How did this happen? So, yeah, I enjoyed that. Well, thank you for that feedback.
Michelle, you gonna finish up?
TJ.
Or TJ, I'm sorry.
Oh,
Yeah, number one, sounds like you jumped right in. And were you there at Lakeview before?
Yeah, actually, so I worked at Lakeview for 5 years. I was an
yeah,
MSCR after school director. Then I took a year off. I was actually at Nuestra Mundo for a year, and then I came back.
Okay. So, you jumped in and you've got a lot going on. It's got a little, kind of, as opposed to a more deliberate approach of what we're seeing at Hawthorne and kind of deciding what needs to be done. But that kind of raises an issue with me that kind of across the board here, which is that part of the vision of community schools is this shared leadership, shared decision-making, collaborative leadership kind of thing. And, surveying people is great, but it's not the same as people deliberating over decisions and having that level of autonomy and things like that. And I know that, you spoke about it being a struggle, but working on it at Mendota. And I guess, to me, that's one of the, when people have ownership, good things happen. And so I guess I'd like to know kind of, what the plans are to enhance that aspect of the community schools model in Madison. And I don't know who that question's for, but a new voice will answer that question.
Voice from the back.
I don't think I can answer it for the whole district, but
you can answer it for one school, which
well,
is good.
just to clarify, for tonight's presentation, we were asked to speak to one portion.
Yeah,
so many things, in addition to our tunnel project, are happening too. And I really agree with what you're saying, TJ, about when people that took on a life of its own with several different leaders. The whole tunnel project. English in schools, NCOS, which is actually from the board, a gift that some schools are getting to really continue to develop. It just wasn't what we were asked to present about tonight.
That makes sense. And
yeah.
like I said,
So I just
it was just kind of
share.
like, it was something I wasn't hearing and,
Yeah.
and a piece that I'm very interested in. So I guess that's
Yes.
why I pulled it out.
Yeah, and just as a little side note too to share, Erica is a strong leader also in our NCOS work,
Okay.
which again is part of the innovative grant from you all from our school board.
Natural circles of support.
Yes.
Natural circles of support.
Which
right,
is
right,
a
which has been-
huge component part to giving our kids voice and our parents voice and I don't know,
You're
their productivity in school and
you're
their
in-
feeling of belonging.
You're in like year 3 or 4 with
Yes,
NCOS.
it's really powerful.
Good to know.
Yeah.
Good to hear.
And so there would be other, many other initiatives that we have happening. I remember being at a meeting where Nichelle and Aaron said, you're supposed to just do a needs assessment, not a lot of activities. So maybe they wanted to make sure we were speaking about our needs assessment and not all of our activities. I just wanted to add that. I follow.
Thank you.
Yeah, I would echo that. I think a lot of the collaborative leadership is born in the community school committee. So principals, all the principals participate in those meetings. The coordination plan is developed and created with the voice of those members. The survey results are incorporated. So that's where it all begins. And these first year schools are going to continue to cultivate that and develop that and create those opportunities to bring the voice of the community school and those folks to the school, the SBLTs, to help kind of guide some of the work of the SIP and vice versa. Their school staff who are on those committees also kind of representing the other side of it. So as the work is built and as those decisions are made, those parents who are serving on those boards and those partners that are serving on those committees are also involved in determining which ones rise to the top, how the work is going to be executed. The principals are also at the table as kind of the school leader, making sure that the voices are being implemented and pulled back into the school and make sure that work is sequential in that way.
Thank you.
All right, so to close us out, I wanted to kind of get back to a question that Gloria asked, and which I think has been previously asked, which is kind of what is the longer term plan for community schools? And for 1920, at this point, we are planning to sustain and adjust using the questions in the validation stage to help us refine our implementation and to get stronger. So our plan at this point is to remain with the 4 schools that we have. 2021, we would like to come back with some, I think some stronger evidence and some of the suggestions that you're making tonight, some of that data in place to be able to come back and say that we think we know the answers to these questions and would like to add additional schools. Right now you see 2 to 4. I don't know how many, because to your point, Gloria, we know that in order to add more schools, we also need to have a strong sustainability plan, that we need to be able to sustain the schools we've started with their designation and then
be able to add more responsibly. So as we are working with the Foundation for Madison Public Schools in their fundraising efforts, as we are continuing to strengthen the 4 schools that we have, we will be working on much more of the detail about what it looks like, the pace and the cost to actually add more schools and sustain them for the long haul. The foundation's grant, just as a reminder, is a 5-year grant. So it's from 2019 to 2023 for them to raise 1.1. And so in many ways, if they're successful in raising the funds they are to raise, and then we are able to request those funds, then we've got a good foundation to expand our schools. In the meantime, we're going to use our carryover grant funds from the grants that we already had. We'll sustain our district level investment and not ask for anything additional at this point, and just continue to get stronger. So that's kind of where we are. I do think a more detailed plan that's more visible and transparent will be forthcoming as we're working through some of the details.
Go ahead, Gloria.
And then, I mean, I think just to go off what TJ was talking about earlier about equity, I mean, I think as part of the process in sustainability is looking at equity and moving through this process through that lens.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So I
Agreed.
would just be asking for that as we are thinking about expanding and investing more in our current schools.
Correct.
Yeah.
I would agree, and I would also note that, you know, part of our revision in the selection process, even for the most recent 2 schools, we had middle schools that are interested.
Mm-hmm.
And when you hear examples from Leopold, right, about just the sheer size and number of students, and we've kind of done almost like a basic formula for how we do community schools.
Mm-hmm.
That's been one of the things on my mind, like, man, if we went to a middle school model and you're adding, there's even more students, like, what is the right staffing allocation? How do you really ensure that that community school is resourced with at least enough to really do the work well? And can we afford that, right? Or do we need to stay at the elementary level? So those are some of the questions that have been also going through our minds too, about how do we do this work well, and looking at long-term sustainability with an equity lens. So thank you for that.
Jen, did you want to say?
Yeah, I was just going to add as a reminder to the board that in addition to the costs associated with staffing and discretionary funds for schools to use to support their focus areas, which we do have to figure out in the next year before we consider further scaling. You mentioned it a little bit, Sonia, I think there are handbook issues here, right? If the job of a teacher changes a little bit in a community school, what does that mean? I just think it's worth really thinking about. Back when we talked with the board about compensation earlier this year, you guys may not remember this, but we touched on what it looks like to potentially invest more compensation-wise in high-need schools, and by definition, community schools are high-need schools and high-needs neighborhoods. I feel like there's some other things that we need to continue to explore. So if the job of being a teacher, and I see some of the principals' heads nodding, if the job of being a teacher in a community school is different, how do we set them up for success? That could mean a slightly different compensation model. I think it's worth really thinking through every aspect of what it means to be a community school beyond simple staffing and discretionary funds.
Okay, TJ and Mary.
On the compensation piece, I was thinking that perhaps the extracurricular model that we use in high schools and middle schools would be an appropriate thing to incorporate in and do that in the handbook. I want to talk a little bit about calendar on terms of a proposal to add 2 to 4 more schools. It would be great if that could come November, December, as opposed to January, February. If it's there, so that it can be either built into the budget or not built in the budget from the very start. as opposed to something where, I think that's fair to everybody, because if you don't want to get too far ahead of yourself without having been budgeted, and you don't want to have people say no. So kind of November, December to me would be the right place on the calendar. That's me, but whatever. But we should be thinking along those lines.
Great, thank you.
Go ahead.
So I just want to thank Michelle and her team and everyone here for the work. I know that what you do is really difficult work, and when we're talking about impacting people's lives outside of just the children in the classroom, but taking that so much broader, I think it gets exponentially more difficult. It also gets exponentially more impactful as well. And that's why we're doing this work. I have been from the start I would say, thank you. That's a skeptic. There was a word I was looking for, and thank you for whispering. Skeptical, because I do believe it's such big work. I really, when we talk about resources, Dean, my guess is if they were really honest in everything, the budgets would be millions and millions of dollars. I mean, it's, and so I really appreciated that you included the community schools as an effective school improvement strategy research. I will be honest, I didn't read every word of the 159 pages, so this is more through a skimming process, but it was clear to me that there are clear lessons and best practices around this work and implementation. And one of the things I gained from skimming it was the strong academic support tie-ins. And I'll just say this, I am still a skeptic. I'm concerned we're doing too many different things. And one of the other clear points in here was that the most effective ones are in districts where the strategy has consistency across schools. And what I'm hearing is in our outreach to make sure we're inclusive of the voice and the viewpoints of those, we open ourselves up to basically modifying or creating our approach based on what people tell us versus what we think is going to be most effective and being informed by those voices. So this is just my continued skepticism. I will be honest, I mean, the results that we show here, Mendota, I know, has had some positive results, but again, as TJ points out, as Jen pointed out, there's not a lot of evidence. Here, I was shocked by the increase in the chronic absenteeism that we've been seeing. That's something I would have hoped, that better relations with families and outreach and our students and understanding their needs would have meant our students were in school more. And so I just encourage that we be really clear about what we want to accomplish, what our strategies are going to be, using those lessons and the foundations that you built, but understand we cannot be all things to all people. We are working with families that have very, very high needs, and we would love to meet them all, but we won't. If we try, we will be unsuccessful. You will be back in this room in 2 years or 4 years, and there will be a different board that will ask, well, hold on, we've been doing this for how many years? What are the results? And then you're going to be fighting for your lives and for the lives of this program. So I want you to be successful. I want us to be successful. We're all in this together, but I think to be successful will require a greater focus and strategies that around those. And it may mean saying no or not now. We'd love to in the future to some, because I want us to be successful with this, even though I am a skeptic.
A healthy skip.
Yeah.
Imad and then TJ.
Just a question. How long do you guys generally spend on like reviewing the priority actions for each school before you roll out the community school, the whole program? How long is usually that whole process? Does it depend?
Can you ask, I'm sorry, can you ask that again?
Yeah, just how long do you guys spend on like determining the priority actions and like streamlining them for each school before we roll them out?
So how long was your needs assessment?
Well, so this is our third year into it. And our, I think it was a good 6 months that we actually did the work on the needs assessment. But our 3 priority areas, we're still heavily focusing on all of them. So we're not ready to just scale back yet and say, let's try something new. We want to make sure that all priority areas are in place and are, you know, really aligned and working before we move forward. And if we are at the point to move forward, we're definitely going to include our committee to give us feedback on what is the right step or should we move forward.
For Hawthorne and Lakeview, they would still be in the process of still kind of getting the big list whittled down. So I don't know how many meetings per se it will take you to do that, but what we've tried to encourage in the first year is to have a thoughtful process that you're not just rushing through. So when we had emphasized to the schools in their first year, take your time to actually listen, to ask, to do the needs assessment, to do the asset mapping. Even if you think you know what the issues are, take your time and do this process and get as much voice in it, because you don't need to really execute any new offerings without being thoughtful about your needs assessment process. So that's what we had told them initially. So you guys are maybe, are you at the point of having your committee rank or prioritize?
We have ranked.
Okay,
Yeah,
so
we
you've
have
ranked
so now
already.
we're just doing those
And it's
areas
April.
within.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I can add a little bit to that too. As part of this year, we started working on a micro-credential about community school and what it means to run a needs assessment, asset mapping, and all of that, which is fairly new for all of us, but it has been very helpful in the way of understanding that there is not a set way of how long it takes for each particular school, because all of our schools are so different and have very different demographics, that it takes what it takes, but at the same time being mindful that we need to get the ball rolling because there's needs that need to be met, and there is things, you know, we need to engage the partners as well. But then as part of doing this whole work and revisiting needs assessments that have already been done, we're also lost my train of thought. We're also working with NEA. They are getting us some sort of support of what like the research says and how to do that in a very intentional and meaningful way.
Yeah, TJ.
Two kind of observations in response to some of the things Mary said. One is that I think that it highlights the need for fully engaged partners around particularly the family services, social services aspects, because there are things that we're a school district and we do have social workers and we have people who do also, and the work you're doing is important and supporting the families is very important, but it's one step away from the core mission of a school district. And so I think that the fully engaged partners, particularly in the school, one of the strengths of a well-functioning community school is that those partners come from the social service, family service world and take care of that. And the second thing is not really having anything to do with you all at all, but we're going to have a similar discussion at some point around the emphases on medicine on a school time project and the academic emphasis versus the cultural emphasis versus the other things. Because that's, and again, that's not, well, actually, so you're all involved in that too, so maybe it isn't for you. But I think that there is, we can't do everything, we can't support everything kind of thing comes up here. And so those are my two observations in response to Mary.
I know that we have had a nice, healthy amount of time with you all, and I appreciate it. I do want to say that I appreciate all of the comments, and Mary, the skepticism is welcomed, because I think we want to be in the position to come back with stronger evidence that what we're doing is working. I will say that in also looking at skimming the review of the literature, one of the things that has become clear to me is that many of the community schools that have been around in other communities they truly are more of the comprehensive model, meaning their district has kind of implemented them with a base investment of integrated services that gets to the family and social services. And I think we're not there yet. We haven't necessarily decided what's the base kind of integrated support menu that we're saying all community schools have, and then we're layering on the family engagement, the strong community partners. And so I think that's some of the future work that we have got to determine how do we do that so that we can get to the outcomes that we're looking for.
Okay, someone else?
I just wanted to add, one of the things that has kind of assisted us or helped us in our position as a community school, last year I had an intern from the UW social work, and then this year our social worker has an intern. So being able to possibly find some sort of partnership with the School of Social Work or School of Education to get these people into the building would also be a really great benefit.
Mm-hmm. Mental
Yeah.
health services also, I mean.
Well, I think that, well, 6 years ago, I ran supporting, when I first got on the board, I ran it on supporting concept of community schools, so I'm glad we have them. So I've been aware of them for many years and in support of them. But to reemphasize, again, what TJ mentioned, that we're really not in this alone. The importance of having our community partners have a foundational understanding of what a community school is and their role in it is really imperative to the success of this. So these, the report that was attached in the end, there's 4 pillars, you mentioned 6, but the integrated services, expanded learning time, family community engagement, collaborative leadership and practices. And everything that's underneath it, there's 10 pages of reporting underneath, and how that all works is it's not all on us. If it's on us, it's just going to be another after-school program that we're running. So it's the ability to develop high-level community partnerships and having them understand and being real partners with us in this thing is the key to it as well. We can do everything right, and the partners just come and do their thing and leave. It won't be good enough. Will just be like a satellite office for them or something. So that's not good enough as to the concept here. So if not just us understand what we're trying to do, but we have to ensure that the partners understand the concept of community school and their role in it. It's not the same as just running their program wherever they are. There's more to it than that. So I'm encouraged. I want to see it continue. I'm encouraged by your presentations here today. So keep it up, and Aaron and Nichelle, our part of it has to be resourced properly, and with that, then that's one way to keep staff consistent and not lose them, because that's an important. On our end, we got to keep staff there that know what they're doing and keep them there and support them properly. All right, anybody else on this issue? Thank you all. Appreciate it then. Okay, we got one more, folks, here. Yeah. And this one is going to be on up for a vote at the end of the month.
In the middle.
So while we're getting set up here, it's important for the board to understand that we will never get, or should we get, what goes on with the staff involved in the work with our students. That's a whole different thing. But we can ask in generic form what actually, what therapies and interventions are being used here. But we will never get specific information, and nor should we. So we can start with that base. And remember, just introduce yourself for the people watching, and then Yeah, I'll get out of the way. Go ahead.
Okay.
Thanks for being here.
So, good evening, board members. My name is Astra Iyayukumari. I think this is my first time appearing before you guys in my official capacity with the district. I'm the new I guess not so new. I'm gonna milk that term new for a while. I'm the new district director of strategic partnerships, also known as Jessica Hankey 2.0. And have encountered many of you in other former capacities that I was in prior to coming to the district, and just some through just community interaction. So I'm happy to be here. I'm really here to just set up and give you a sort of an overview of one of our 10 high-intensity partnerships up for renewal this year, behavioral health in schools. This is, again, this is a high-intensity partnership that is ending in September of this year, and we are seeking a renewal, a 3-year renewal. So this partnership is really designed to deliver health services to kids in 8 middle schools currently, and intending in this next renewal to expand by 4 schools, which I think are still being selected. So
6 elementary and 2 middle.
Okay, 6 elementary and 2 middle. So, in those middle schools, those schools are Shank, Glendale, Leopold, Mendota, Senate, New Estramundo, Blackhawk, and Frank Alice, and whatnot. So, the idea is to provide mental health services to kids that are experiencing where their mental health is deficit or whatever is interfering with their learning process, and or they experience barriers to accessing mental health services in general. So the partnership is consistent of the district, Catholic Charities, Children's Hospitals of Wisconsin, and the UW-Madison. This renewal, I think what's important to elevate here is that this renewal is really consistent. It's a merging of 2 different partnerships in the past. So one being BHS was, this partnership was approved for 1 year back in April of 2016. Then there was a 5-year, $1 million grant that the UW-Wisconsin Partnership Program provided. And that was a medium, so the BHS partnership, the original one, was a high intensity, and the $1 million grant was a medium intensity. So the intent of this renewal is to merge all of those because the partners are basically the same. And Armando will get into more detail on that. I think what this MOA, the big differences to Elevate are really that there's a planned expansion of the schools, as we mentioned earlier. There's removed references to a data system that's not used. There's simplified rationale of the program description. There's targeted goals that are more refined and appropriate and more realistic, basically. And removing so the public health department of Madison and Dane County is being removed from the MOA as a partner because their work has been completed. And so really that's what I wanted to elevate. There's I guess a universe of funders as part of this. I think the vision is that 75% of the funding or the support of this partnership would be through billing insurance companies eventually. But right now, I think that it's at a 50% reimbursement rate, and so each school gets a 0.5 half-time clinician, $45,000 a year. Half of that is being funded through reimbursement of billing to insurance companies. And then the other half right now comes from the grant, comes from MMSD, and a number of other sources. So that's that.
Okay. Thank you so much, Astra. My name is Armando Hernandez, and I'm the Assistant Director of Integrated Health with Student Services Office of Physical, Mental, and Behavioral Health. It's great to be back here to talk about behavioral health in schools. As you all know, not too long ago, we talked about this program in the context of our efforts around supporting our students with high intensive needs. I want to make a few acknowledgments before I start. First and foremost, my co-presenter, who's unfortunately is unable, or our third presenter, who unfortunately unable to be here today, Kristen Getchow. She's our mental health coordinator, and really she is at the center of our both expansion and implementation of this program in the district. Also, as Astra mentioned, this is a partnership, which means is that a number of different community partners come together. UW's School of Social Work, actually through, in particular, the person of Tally Moses, who has been part of our program from the beginning. She has been a community partner from then. She's also our evaluator and academic partner. So the evaluation that you have reviewed was written by Tally, and if you have specific technical questions about it, she's here to help me out and help us understand it. Also, this is a program in partnership with our mental health agencies, as Astra mentioned, Catholic Charities and Children's Hospital of Wisconsin. They really staff our 6 talented and exceptional clinicians that support this program. Obviously, they are at the center of this effort. And then finally, each one of the participating schools has a school-based behavioral health in school coordinator who really partners very directly with that clinician. It really makes the program happen within each of the school. I think tonight you've seen a thread of during the 2 previous presentations. Obviously, we are in Nuestro Mundo, and we are in the 2 first community schools. So you have heard BHS referenced a couple of times. So, so with that, what I want to do today, so I have a number of slides. I'm going to go over them fairly quickly, and then just really allow you to jump in with any questions or anything that you would like me to discuss in more detail. But I want to mostly just focus on the general trends of the evaluation, and then really talk a little bit about what the next steps are in our program. Before we get to this, we all know what we're here is to really continue our focus on mental health, which has been a priority for MMSD for quite a number of years. We know that 1 in 5 of our children experiences mental health concerns. We know many of those do not receive the treatment that they need. And we know that it is a critical component to children's readiness to learn. I want to read this quote from our evaluation to bring forth one of the voices of our clinicians. They said, talking of a student who participates in the program, she doesn't have any more suicidal ideations. She's able to actually reflect on her own behavior and talk about her decision making and how that is connected to the sexual abuse in her family. She said to me, I kind of look at that person that I was and the person that I want to be. I want to be someone that I feel proud about myself, and my family feels proud of me. And I wanted to read this just to really highlight that when we talk about delivering mental health services in school, we really are talking about serving those students with the most intensive needs, needs that include suicidal ideation, include trauma, and other concerns. So this big complicated graph really captures the big picture of the mental health initiatives that we have in our district. So I just wanted to make the point that we're really just highlighting on one program of the many initiatives that we have. Also in your packet, you have included a description of other of those programs so we can further discuss the connections between them. This slide just provides a summary of, again, the 8 participating schools. In the last 3 years, we have served 242 students. 87% of those students have Badger Care, and 73% of those students are the first time that they're receiving mental health services. So that really speaks to the fact that we are really serving our target population. And you can see some of the other relevant demographics as well. So some of the key take-home points based on the evaluation. This program is meeting the critical needs of students. It is implemented successfully, and it is improving the school's capacity for them to implement the program. And while the data is positive, there's of course room for both refinement and improvement. The data shows, I'll let you sort of read through those. A number of data points indicate significant improvement, particularly in the areas of attendance and behavioral referral, as well as a lot of anecdotal evidence that really speaks to the positive impact of the program. And then finally, some of the recommendations that the evaluation put forth. We, of course, want to continue to improve school readiness and their capacity for effective implementation. We want to expand our capacity to serve more students, increase the clinician's ability to consult with staff. We know that that is a component that, as was mentioned earlier, that really school staff identify as a really positive element of the program. We want to continue to promote parent engagement and modify both our data collection and evaluation processes. So the future ahead, as you'll know, you are being critically supportive in this effort to expand to an additional 4 schools for next year. We are right now in the midst of our school application process. We actually have 20 schools that have expressed interest in BHS for next year. So this is a lot of schools for 4 spots, 13 elementary schools and 7 middle schools. So as we talk about the growth of the program moving forward, I think that's something really important. While we think that 4 schools is the right number, given capacity, given our current status as we look at our current partnerships, I think that a point of ongoing discussion for us is going to be moving into the following year, at what level should we increase? So it's something that we can likely discuss a little bit further. We are, of course, strengthening the connection between Universal Supports and BHS, which is an intensive program. We want to modify our MOA. You have a copy of the Redline MOA with some of our proposed edits. And then lastly, continue to promote a program model that is consistent with our principles, and that can be promoted within each school context. And then finally, I want to end with a quote from a student that really speaks to the benefit of the program. You see there a quote from a parent who was also a part of the evaluation. And this student says, "I like that they saw where I needed help. Talked about family first and then my attitude. I like that they took things step by step and not all at once. They helped me with my attitude and a way of dealing with stuff. They helped me communicate better with people and other adults. Now it is easier to talk to family without feeling scared." Thank you so much.
Thank you,
Open it up.
both of you.
Yeah.
We had not that long ago, a good discussion about the expansion, went over a lot of details of it. Are there any specific questions? TJ, go ahead.
Thanks again for the work, and I'm glad to see that we're able to expand this and that there's a good plan in place. I guess, and with Tally here, actually, maybe if you could come up, I'd really like to see following the students beyond multiple years in the evaluation, and I don't know if that's possible. Whether we can follow students,
or can we hand off to a partner, maybe?
For evaluation purposes, can we follow students is the question. And because if so, I'd like to have that written in the MOA. And if we can't, then it's a barrier to be. I'm really interested to know whether these are short-term effects, long-term effects, what kind of follow-up, whether the students continue to receive services, whether they're receiving services in the community. I mean, all that kind of stuff is to me, one of the striking things is that this is the first time access to mental health services for a lot of these students, and then is it, a gateway to receiving services that they need beyond this program and things like that. So I would like to follow students.
Yeah. So I am with you. I think we definitely can, and I think that makes a lot of sense as we look ahead. We know who those students are, so I think we'll be able to continue to track them. We have Tally for another couple of years, so I think that we'll continue to work together and possibly beyond. I think one of the additional pieces that we're excited to on the topic of tracking is for also us to internally track the students who are participating in this program, so that as students move from school to school, that we know who they are and that we can support them.
Also integrate into our early warning kind of things additionally with transitions.
Yeah. Anything you wanted to add to that?
Just to say that I totally agree. It would be great to know sort of, is this a planted seed that flourishes, amplifies over time? And it's easier to do that with data relating to the school performance part, right? As opposed to giving whatever, we don't know if we're going to continue with the SDQ, the Strengths and Difficulties Questionnaire, but whatever is used, it would be very difficult to probably implement that over.
To access the students
to
for
access the
for
student
further
over time.
And families, yeah. Yeah, so we can just track the attendance and which is
limited because
it's something,
not,
but it's better than
it's
nothing.
better, yes.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yes.
But if we can rewrite the MOA to look at something like that, that would be great. Nothing too specific, but just the concept.
Yeah.
Cool.
I think we can do that for sure.
One question. I'm all for the program. I'm very big on mental health services. The word tracking scares the living heck out of me. Because in the disability community, tracking means creating a record so that way when you transfer through open enrollment, it's a reason to keep you out.
This would be follow-up. Tracking is just a bad word, but like
I'm
following
not trying
up.
to be semantic language police. I just want to make sure that it doesn't have a negative effect.
That's a
good point. Yeah, and in situations that of the students who are working with continued services, if someone now in 5th grade is going to 6th, then they're losing. So if there are handoffs to community partners, that even if we can't get feedback from them on their progress, if the therapy continues, I'm cool with that. So I got you. And it, some way, and maybe if we do go to a middle school, one of the criteria would be that the elementary schools that feed it have the services so that service could continue. We might want to consider that if we ever get to that point. James?
Yeah, just to understand the numbers. I've asked the question before. So 242 students been served in 3 years. Out of what's the population of students needing to be served?
Oh, wow.
You said 1 in 5, so if I just do the math, that's 5,000 kids.
Yeah, so it would be totaling all the students of each one of those schools. But I think so even if we do some quick math, we know where there's a chasm between the 15 to 20 students that we're serving and those that we can imagine that need services. Now, we can imagine that many of those students are getting services through their healthcare home. So there's other services that they might be receiving. Some of those students might be receiving other types of services, whether it's through Tier 2 groups or other lower level type of support provided by student services staff that might be adequate. But regardless, I agree that particularly as we look at our schools that have a higher population, we know that a 50% clinician it's likely not meeting quite the need that is there.
Yeah, I guess I'm just thinking about a myriad of questions I can ask in regard to that when we start talking about factors that impact behavior and things of this nature and the other things we're trying to get at in school. So I won't even go there tonight. I'll leave that to the board members that have been around for years. I just wanted to make sure I understood the numbers as I leave out the door.
Jen, do you want to respond?
Yeah, I was actually wondering if Armando, you could expand on that a little bit, because Carletra mentioned earlier tonight her desire to have a full-time clinician. That's not the first time I've heard that at one of the BHS schools, which says to me that she sees need that isn't being addressed.
Yeah.
I know that this proposal currently is to only expand by 4, but what about the current schools where there may be, every school is different, right, but where there may be more demand for this kind of intensive support as opposed to other kinds of support? Just talk to us about the halftime clinician.
Yeah, so we know that there's a critical need for expansion within schools. So as we look at schools not only like Mendota, but Leopold, a very large school with 700 students, Senate Middle School that is very large as well. So that has been a tough nut to crack in terms of figuring out a sustainable model. Our initial rationale for the 0.5 wasn't because we thought this was going to meet the need, was more because we wanted to make it the 0.5 sustainable in a school to then grow from there. We have looked at some alternative funding sources in terms of those schools that want to increase that that allocation. But clearly that's one of the themes that really came out of the evaluation. So I think that's something on us to continue those conversations and to figure out as we think about expansion. We don't only want to think of additional schools, but look at within. We don't have a very specific model of really providing some, I mean, other than some things that we do know, number of students, and we can predict 1 in 5. Beyond that, we don't have a specific way of knowing what is the true unmet mental health need, which again, we can fairly say that it is there. I think that would be clear per report of the schools. But yes, it's certainly a point for us to continue to explore.
So maybe just
Kate, then Mary.
Maybe just to follow up on the kind of impact comments. I mean, I guess I share a little bit of Mary's skepticism earlier around community schools based on some of the impact that we have seen in a kind of a 3-year window. This program has always seemed remarkable to me because it is so clearly the opposite. And in the sense that, if I'm reading this right, we're seeing increased attendance rates, significant decreases in behavior incidents, in relatively stark data showing impact. Is that, you guys are looking at me?
Just to be clear, it's among the, not for the entire group, but for the students who come into the program with less than optimal attendance or with 1 or more level 2 behavior incidents. So students who already fall into that at-risk category in attendance, suspensions, and
yeah, so we're improving attendance for folks who aren't attending,
for those
and we're
kids,
improving
absolutely.
behavior for folks who are struggling with behavior.
For the students treated. Yeah, for the students treated who come in with these concerns.
So, I mean, I guess for comparable cost per school, if not a little less per school than community schools, I just, from a resource allocation perspective, I know we've always kind of challenged how can we do more faster, but I just, as a group, wouldn't we, you guys are staring at me strangely from a comparable. I'm sorry, I can't hear about half of what's going on tonight. I have.
So are you saying that?
So if I'm saying something that doesn't align.
No. I'm just listening to you. I'm just wondering, are you saying that you're only comparing community schools to this partnership because of
resource
because of data being able to be able to support the justification of the investment? Is that what you're saying?
I'm literally just asking, I guess, this group the question of, we have a certain amount of resources and we want to make this much impact, and we're talking about 3 things tonight, all of which are different angles on the same question, which is how to support a group of young people that have significant unmet needs, whose families have significant unmet needs, in order to support better academic success. And it seems to me that we have one program with very clear data showing efficacy and one with less clear. And I'm wondering why we wouldn't double down more. And I appreciate that every time we see you, we ask you this question. But it feels like the onus of efficacy we need to see from some of our other programs needs to be higher, because we do have some programs that are showing it.
And I would say, Kate, that's...
Speak up, Jen. You're the hardest one.
Sorry. I would say that is why these guys are at different stages. This program, I think this evidence shows that it's been validated and it is time to scale the program. And we need to figure out how quickly we can do it and how we can invest. We're at a different stage, and the outcomes, what we've been able to measure is so much more precise here. We're looking at exactly the students who've been treated. Community schools, we haven't been measuring the students and families who've been impacted by the strategies that you heard about tonight. I mean, this is part of our problem. We can't even talk about, I mean, we can't make a decision about further scaling on community schools, and maybe we won't, precisely because we haven't been able to actually figure out how to measure impact appropriately. I mean, we're not asking you guys to expand community schools right now. We're asking for time to figure out how to measure its impact. And if at that next phase that Nichelle described earlier tonight, if we can't, right, we then, based on the decision-making model that we recently had you vote on, you'll make decisions about whether or not you pull back or move forward with community schools. I think we're just at a very different stage here. I get the questions, how can we do more faster? Because we've got a model that's showing that we're getting great results for the kids that are treated. So it's really a purely capacity issue.
Yeah.
And not just a money issue is what I hear from Armando, but maybe you can talk more about that too.
Yeah, I guess this sort of builds on it. I mean, one of the beauty of this model is also that we're looking at $707,000 spending, and we're only $193,000 of it. So that's really great. Talk about effective use of resources. So my question is, I mean, obviously I understand insurance reimbursement. The WPP grant, how long does that go on for, and is that scalable?
Yeah, so it goes for another 2 years.
Okay.
So after 2021, it ends. So we are looking at a drop there in the funding. Essentially, the WPP grant is funding the evaluation component. We hope to have systems in place so that we ourselves can continue to support that with the collaboration of our data department. The other two components is around 50, 60, it sort of varies year to year for supporting the actual delivery of the program, and then it supports the project management component. So that is something that is in our radar for that year, how we can also make up that difference. We know that DPI and other state funds and grants are in place that we could potentially allocate towards this program, and they're not at the level of WPP.
Does the Blue Cross Blue Shield money fund any mental? WPP. That's what well, they have plenty of money.
Yeah.
So, yeah, okay, and another question is just understanding what are the services that our school psychologists are delivering versus what the clinicians in this program delivering.
Yeah, so it's definitely a both and.
It's a different program, I mean, right?
Yeah, so we always think of it as this school mental health being expanded school mental health. We know that our student services staff, not only our school psychologists, but our social workers and our school counselors, they do a number of services that fall under that larger umbrella of school mental health.
But I do actually want to understand this. I understand that. I want to understand the school psychologists. Those are trained professionals to provide mental health services, or no? No, I see you're saying.
Well, it varies. It depends on the specific school psychologist, what level of credentialing they have.
Yeah.
They are not credentialed to deliver specialized psychotherapy inside the schools.
Okay.
So this service, it's delivered at a higher intensity, and it's essentially, quote, medical treatment for an identified a diagnosis. In practice, however, you may very well have a school psychologist who provides more of a intervention for anxiety or intervention for any number of issues. So there is some overlap there. But this is certainly treatment that is for those high intensity needs, that instead of saying they need to go elsewhere to get the treatment that they need, they can get it inside the school.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
You were next, Sam.
You know, just kind of picking up on some of the things Kate was saying about our priorities and expansion and things like that. And again, this doesn't really, this is kind of an observation for these folks, is that the community schools has become a priority, a fundraising priority with our partnership with Madison, Foundation of Madison Public Schools. And in some ways, when we talk about where we want to go and what we want to do in terms of validation and things like that, we have to be careful to get ahead of ourselves with that we've gone to the community and said, this is our initiative, we want you to fund it, and then when it comes to the validation process, we go, oh, well, we actually didn't want you to. So I think we have to be careful about that. I think that very, very generous contributions have allowed us to get to this point and to sustain for the next 50 years and to look towards the expansion as a possibility. And very appreciative of that, but we don't get too far ahead of ourselves in terms of telling our generous donors that, this is phase 2, 3, and 4 that we're committed to, because I'm hearing we're not committed yet.
Well, I don't think, I think what I heard from you, Jen, is that we haven't been able to measure the people
We may be
that
having
we're
a
impacting,
tremendous impact,
which is
right?
fair. I think my point is we have a very clear yardstick here.
Yeah.
We have a clear yardstick of a program that's saying, 70 to 80% of kids touched are improving attendance, behavior, suspensions.
Agreed.
Where there was improvement possible or needed. Is that, you guys keep looking at me like I'm not.
The findings are not, they're very positive, especially around the kids who came in with some challenges in those school functioning areas. There are some mixed findings with respect to the mental health symptom profiles. I mean, so I don't know if you read the details on all that, but so yeah. Data can be used. They can be
all kinds of ways.
I'm clear that data can tell a lot of stories.
It is very positive.
It
is.
We also don't have, everyone's trying to make the data say the best possible thing, and we don't have a lot of programs that are showing even in one iteration
positive.
this, right? So my point is more that we have clear impact from a program. That's fantastic for us as a district. This should be a yardstick for us to use for some of our other programs, because we know this type of impact can be possible, even if it's not perfect and it's not as much as we want, right?
Sure.
Whereas we have only so many resources to go around, right?
Let me ask you, I'm not sure what you're asking. We compare other programs' success with this one? I don't think I agree with that. This is that what you're saying?
I'm saying from a resource, as we think about programs that we're using to impact, really behavior is the thing that we're kind of talking about here, social and emotional well-being, right? So behavior and attendance are the two metrics used here. They're decent metrics. They're the same metrics that were pulled out in the last discussion that we had, right, at least attendance. I think they are slightly comparable in terms of where we would use resources in a resource-constrained world.
Well, from that perspective, yeah, but
you guys have
I'm sorry.
They don't amplify.
They're for the broadcast.
I'm talking. Yeah. Well, my experience in working with mental health field with 25 years is that it's often a roller coaster. We're seeing success with someone in 5th grade, and in 6th grade, it's 2 steps back often, unless it's even with ongoing therapy, these things happen. So that's why it's important to be consistent and follow through. And as we're talking about continuing, once you start, it needs to continue, especially if someone's in elementary. In middle school, all kinds of things happen to a child's chemistry, and that impacts that too. And even when they get older, if they're on medication, the medication often doesn't work at some point. The same stuff isn't working, and then the next month it doesn't. So you get that roller coaster. So this is really tricky and delicate stuff that we're really glad to hear that the impact it's having. And I think a significant difference here is or we can bill 87% of our people with that kids are getting service with Badger Care and MA. We can bill CCS potentially. I believe you told me there was a percentage of kids that of the 242 that were homeless.
Mm-hmm.
There's potential new billing available for that once the state gets the approval to bill for homeless services. So there's opportunities to expand the program through outside income sources, and we can certainly supplement it. And I really think we should. The four school expansion, we got a piece of that. It also, there's limitations as to the capacity of the providers to come in there. You just can't have anyone come in there. There really have to be certain type of people that are able to do that. So our ability to expand at a faster scale have some limiting factors to it. We would like to see this doubled almost, and then perhaps get to those 20 schools that want it quickly. But there are limitations here. So there are ways to explore continued funding, which could help us do it and then we should consider our own investment in it absolutely to make sure we get it. So, and no one here has not heard the need for this ever since I've been on the board and prior to that. So this is, we're trying to catch up as fast as we can, and I would urge us to do that. Let's take some risk and expand it where we can and search for funding sources. So in that respect, I don't disagree with you at all. We should ramp this up as fast as we can.
Can I make two comments, Dean? One is, last time we brought this to the board, several years ago, we were only a couple years in, and the outcomes were not this good. I remember that very distinctly, and it proves something about the fact that as we work to better implement things over time, this is a great example of something that has actually improved. We've learned a lot, we've applied those lessons, and we'll have to do it again to address the things that were not positive in this evaluation. And the way that the model works right now, I mean, it really is wonderful and allows us potentially the possibility for a lot of expansion if the healthcare providers can step up. Armando and I were talking earlier about the RFP process that would be necessary for kind of signaling to the community that we need them to be prepared for expansion at a certain rate. That's really important. And the district's responsibility is to pay the 20% of that clinician's role that isn't reimbursable. Right? This is the part where they're not working with kids, but they're working with the rest of the staff, which is what makes this, I think, as powerful it is. It's not just about the direct service to kids, but about supporting staff and trauma-informed practice. Without that feedback loop back to the staff as a whole, I don't think this would be as successful as it is right now. Anyway, it sounds like there's a lot of support for this program. Is there feedback on the MOA itself, which is what you'll be voting on?
That's great.
Okay, beautiful.
I'd just like to have one change that TJ said about at least looking at the attendance status, since we can't do the other to try to continue with.
Perfect.
Yeah.
But other than that, I think it looks good.
Awesome. Thanks, you guys.
Well, again, encouraging news, and keep up the good work.
Thank you so much.
Guys, it's been, I have just deep respect for everybody at this table. This is my last meeting. I don't think we got anything left on our agenda here. So we got a lot to do going forward. TJ, good luck tomorrow, buddy. And I'll move to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor? Imad? Aye. All in favor? Aye. Thank you, everybody.